I've played quite a few TTRPG systems in my day, mainly Pathfinder and 5e, with some Starfinder sprinkled in there somewhere. But I'm experienced in those systems, and that's good enough for me, because today I'm here to talk about the serious issue I have with these systems. I'm a content creator, gosh dang it, and that means I have to talk about my opinions and issues at any possible moment. Now, before I slam my meat on the table and tell you what I think the issue is with these TTRPG systems, and how I would fix them, here's some background for you. I've been playing both Pathfinder and 5e consistently with a group of friends for years now. I love them to death. My favorite group to play with. They're a group of awesome storytellers and role players with some great creativity when it comes to character creation. But my god, the combat! It's just way too simple, and sometimes I want the combat itself to be interactive and rewarding creativity and strategy. My usual group's combat always boils down to standing still and attacking. Never move, even if you can see a fireball coming from a mile away. Only ever move if you're a melee fighter running straight towards the enemy. Sometimes it's hard to enjoy the combat when most enemies are rendered completely useless by taking one step back. Or if the caster has an axe being swung at his face but refuses to step away unless it's by casting Teleport. A high-level spell that could have been saved for later. It's not just the enemies. No, party members also do this. I get why we played like this for a while, since we were a theater of the mind group for a long time. But we've moved to using maps in our fights. So why do we still do this? I cannot see how standing stone still in place, attacking the enemy over and over again, is any fun. When I think of epic fights, I think combatants circling each other, clashing blades and backing away, darting around the battlefield, tricking opponents into an environmental disadvantage, pushing opponents back with a merciless onslaught of brutal strikes, dodging big attacks by physically moving away from where it would have hit. Stuff like that. But the way those systems are, there's no incentive to do that. There's no mechanical way to do that, and sometimes you're even punished for trying to do that. Not hating on my group, by the way. I still love them to death. And it's not entirely their fault. So I'll be trying to fix this issue of mine by making a rule set that anyone can use in their games. But I'll be focusing on 5e for this. Sorry, it's just by far the easiest rules-wise to do anything with. And there's all kinds of things in the rules that I would change, or I would add, so I'll likely make a series out of this type of thing. But enough rambling, let's talk about making movement better in combat. First things first, let's set our goal. A simple rule set compatible with 5e that adds to the depth of combat. A simple task, right? Wrong. Even official material has optional rules so convoluted, so inconvenient, that it just ruins the experience while trying to offer more options. So we're gonna improve that. But we're gonna point out how stupid one of those rules is that they came up with themselves. It's the facing rules. 5e's base combat already allows us to move before, after, and in between attacks, if you have the movement for it. But just because a system lets you do it, doesn't mean it gives you a reason to do it. Really, what's the point of moving around an enemy to attack at different spots, if the AC is the same all over? Well, there's a few neat little optional rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide about directional facing and flanking, which we'll use as a base and modify appropriately. With the facing optional rule, a creature's adjacent squares are separated into arcs. The front arc, the left and right side arcs, a back arc, a tournament arc, a training arc, The creature can attack in the front arc and the side arc respective to the hand that's holding the weapon. And if the creature has a shield, that AC bonus applies only to the front arc and the side arc of the hand that's holding the shield. Not just that, but attacking an enemy's back gives you advantage on your attacks. This optional rule alone gives us a reason to move around in combat, or at least move around inside the creature's reach. But without some sort of balance, the fight would just devolve into hitting each other's backs. So as a reaction, when it's not your turn, you can turn to face a direction, to presumably face towards an enemy. I don't think that's enough to balance it though. Considering the amount of combatants, and with the standard 30-foot movement speed, you can move around a medium-sized creature 1.5 times, making the one direction change around useless. So I suggest each creature gets a number of direction changes per round equal to their Dex mod with a minimum of 1. It also makes sense because Dex is already tied to reaction time and AC, so the faster the character, the more you can react in a turn. Though, it might make Dex even more overpowered than it already is. Sweet, that gives us a reason to move around in fights, but there's a major problem that people might encounter with this rule. It's very, very cumbersome and complex. It could slow down combat a whole lot. If I wanted to do a lot of bookkeeping, I would have just played a caster. So if you'd like an easier time but still want to spice up combat, I'd strongly suggest going with the following rules. Which I prefer, by the way. Flanking. My goodness, I love flanking. It's simple, easy, elegant, and encourages something even more important than positioning. Team positioning. Because D&D is usually not a one-player game. If the party surrounds an enemy, they get either bonuses or advantage on their attack rolls, which is awesome, as long as the DM is consistent about which one they give out, because inconsistent rulings are the bane of my existence. And that surrounding could look like this, this, or maybe even this, if you're good enough. But not this. Finally, an easy rule that promotes moving and positioning. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Flanking by itself sucks. In that first turn or two, someone gets surrounded and flanking kicks in, which is great because you get rewarded for good positioning. But what next? Well, we just sit here with one side getting advantage on all their attacks. If the surrounded dude tries to move out, he gets hit by a lot of opportunity attacks. Yeah, you could use disengage to get out without a scratch. But if that dude isn't significantly faster than the thing surrounding them, they get immediately surrounded again. Most of those attacks will have advantage still. And that surrounded creature didn't get to attack or cast that turn. Disengage, as is, in a blank room, is just a wasted turn if you don't have it as a bonus action. Meaning flanking is bad for game balance if there's no way for the enemy or player to escape it. So we're going to make ways to escape it. What should we do to fix it though? Well, we can't make disengage a bonus action without taking away from rogue and monk. But what we can do is tweak what it does just a bit. Disengage will still cost an action, so if you get yourself surrounded, you have to eat that mistake and lose your action for the turn. But now disengage will allow you to move half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks as your action. If you somehow still haven't escaped your enemy's threatened spaces after that, well, that sucks, because you'll just have to take those opportunity attacks during your movement. Giving just a little speed boost with disengage allows you to way more easily escape being surrounded and flanked, and it doesn't completely outclass dash as the go fast option. So far in my testing, I haven't encountered any major problems with doing this, and it does meet our goal of fixing flanking and rewarding tactical movement and teamwork to keep surrounding enemies in a fair way. That's all well and good. We now have reasons and ways to move in and out of melee. But I want more options to spice up combat for us non-casters, make us feel all important-like. So let's start with some battlefield control. Moving enemies around how you want. That's all modes! The shove action exists! I know it does. And it kinda sucks. Really, really bad. In place of one of your attacks, you can make an athletics check against your enemy's athletics or acrobatics check. And if successful, you knock them prone or push them 5 feet away from you. Who decided the balance of these choices? Do you want to give your enemy a horrible, horrible condition to have? Or do you want to push them 5 whole feet in a very limited direction? Why would anyone ever choose to push instead of knock prone, unless the enemy somehow puts themselves on the very edge of a death pit? The solutions I found are these. I've changed the shove action just a little bit. Instead of that second option just pushing 5 feet away from you, you can move the target 5 feet in any direction, except if that move would put them onto yourself or another creature's space. Then, after moving them, you can follow up by taking a free 5-foot movement into the space that creature last occupied. This means if you really need to move an enemy somewhere, for some reason, or just because you want to, your fighters and monks, with more attacks than they know what to do with, can push enemies all over the place. But let's expand on shoving a little more. Let's say there's a feat that I just made up. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Called Cyclone Shove. Prerequisite 15 strength. And that feat stated that you can, in place of an attack, shove every adjacent creature using 1 athletics roll. Each creature has to make their opposing check against that roll. Of course, it's only fair. You decide which unsuccessful targets are knocked prone and which are moved 5 feet. You can only follow up on 1 target after this action. You can't be in 2 places at once. I think it would be a very, very powerful positioning and anti-flanking tool. But that's up to you if you introduce it to your game. But by far the most important thing for encouraging fun and exciting battles is the environment design. Stop having battles in empty rooms with nothing to do unless it complements the monster's abilities really well. And that's pretty much all I got when it comes to making movement matter more in combat. In my experience, these rules in tandem all work beautifully, and it makes combat more fun, strategic, and even more cinematic. So if your group is finding melee combat boring, like I often do, I would definitely recommend trying out this rule set. If you want to see more videos like this, like and subscribe. I'll see you next time on Rule System Surgery.